Ned Atkins. I'm the Director of Education at Upload, and I worked with the Wonder Buffalo team at our Sundance event, got to try the experience, meet the whole team. It was great, so really excited to be speaking with them again and moderating this panel. So today we'll be going over the next 30 minutes into really the social and storytelling parts of the Wonder Buffalo piece. So social being, what are the social change messages, where did they originate from? And then the storytelling, how VR impacted the story of the piece, why they chose to have a VR component to their movie. So to begin, I'd love to have each person on the team introduce themselves. So just to give you guys, so it doesn't get confusing, we have 3 producers and 1 creative director, and writer. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'm Brian. I was the VR producer and the lead Unity developer on this VR project. If you don't know anything about Wonder Buffalo, I'll be giving a full breakdown of the ideation around it right after this, so stick around. And yeah, I was just excited to do a real-time rendered cinematic experience in collaboration with all these guys.
Hi, I'm Christine Berg. I'm the co-writer and director of Wonder Buffalo.
Hi, I'm Drew Diamond. I was the producer of Wonder Buffalo, which meant that I was overseeing the physical production of the short film and the VR production as well, as we did them both simultaneously.
And I'm Eric Weaver, the executive producer of the short.
Thank you. So to start off, just in the audience, who has tried Wonder Buffalo? Great, so most of you, some of you have not. Christine or Drew, or actually any of you, if you could give a little overview of the story on both the short film side and the VR experience side, so we can put this talk into context for those who have not yet tried the experience.
So it all started off with a script for a short film. And the short film was basically based on my childhood of being a Thai American girl, having struggles with the expectations of a Thai mother. And that difficulty being an American kid being told you can do whatever you want to do and be whatever you want to be, but at home a mother telling you if you're fat you're never going to succeed and be anything. So my escape was through art as a child. So as an adult and a screenwriter and a filmmaker, I struggled with how do I tell this story, but with hope in the end, and not just a big finger pointing at my mother, you suck, and you still suck, and there's ramifications for that. Where my co-writer Simon, being really close to me, could see definitely in me as a human being what I needed to do to get over it, which was to empower myself and find my own joy instead of thinking about what my mother thought. So that's how we came up with this whole idea of Wonder Buffalo going through this journey and finding the hero within herself to find joy within herself and her dreams.
Great, and then the VR experience takes one part of the short film and puts you in that immersive world. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and so it's actually not a scene from the short film. It's actually a separate scene. So that one of the things that was really important to us was knowing that the short film would have its life with the film festival and being able to be shown on private links or whatever method we were deciding. We knew that VR would be a whole different medium. We were going to have specific installations that we could show it, but really the platform for distribution would depend on when we finish it. We knew it was going to be changing the whole time. So one of the things that was really important was that the VR piece could live on its own and be its own parallel narrative. So in the piece itself, you have a scene play out between the mother and daughter, and it's actually using the opening location for the short film. So the same exact set that we had for the short film, which we captured with photogrammetry by Reiner Gombos, who will be speaking later as well. And with that, you then witness the scene play out in full 360 immersive space. And then you're able to grab the pen that the daughter's been using to draw comics and cosplay ideas with, and you're able to go around on a hunter-gathering kind of mission to find the power props that empower her. And with each one you select, you're actually changing this photoreal room into a surrealist comic book-esque setting.
Great, thank you for that overview. I'd like to delve now into the social change messages behind the piece and Christine's inspiration specifically. So Christine, you mentioned briefly how you and your relationship with your mother, as well as some body issues growing up, were a big influence in the piece. So I'd love to hear a little bit more in detail about your relation to the main character, maybe some symbolism throughout the piece. If you could start there, that'd be great.
Well, there's been a good several decades since, being a teenager and growing up with my mother, that I never realized her voice never left me, and that my image of what my body is totally dysmorphed. So I was really interested in, not just for myself, but everyone's connection to their body or body dysmorphia, and how that can get in the way of having a healthy, happy life. It would be beautiful that we could all walk around and be the good humans we want to be, instead of always reacting to the pain we feel inside. Because it really doesn't fucking matter what we look like, right? But that's what we deal with every day. So, and since we're both the co-writer, Simon and I are artists, and are always online dealing with art or drawn to comic books and comic book stories, we were really fascinated with the cosplay world, and how it ran the gamut of body sizes, where people were really finding this world where they can, if not be themselves, be the selves that they want to be by wearing different costumes. And so one question I always asked myself was, could I ever do that? Fuck no, I can't. I could not get in a costume like that, skin tight, and go out there and be that brave. And so we brought that into this story of, and I don't think it's just a Thai American thing or a mother-daughter thing. All of us have had that experience with our parents, where there is an expectation of what the best you can be, but that's from your parents' own life experience and what they know, and not giving you that opportunity to grow into your own human being. So these were all struggles I had as not just a Thai American child, but I think we all go through at different levels of confidence or not, that we wanted to explore in this movie. And it was specifically a challenge and a fun challenge to figure out, how would you do this in VR? Because in a movie, you watch it and you walk away and you're affected or not, you're connected or not. What I was interested in VR was, how can we also bring someone into this experience where they actually go through and feel and have agency within the own arc of the experience? And in this whole design of this thing, the question was, well, what if this doesn't work? Like, everything that we decided was really kind of wonky and crazy and fun, but there was a lot of plotting and collaboration and experimenting, and then in the end, just a lot of hope this really works, to see if we can give somebody their own experience to empower themselves through this story.
Great, thank you. So in order to convey the social message, you guys went to pretty great lengths to kind of ensure the authenticity of the piece, even in your choice of actors. Could you go into a little detail of that for the audience?
So there are not a lot of chubby Thai teenage actors. Actually, there's none. And I think my experience through film school gave me the courage to, with this piece, also go with non-actors. When you are a filmmaker who holds a priority in diversity, sometimes, and you want a quality of realism, sometimes you really have to go on that limb. And the first thing people say when you're casting is, don't go for looks. But I've seen so many films where, when I'm looking at my people, or Asian Americans, Asians, Thai people, I don't feel like I'm looking at something authentic. I see beautiful stars who I find it hard that they're going through whatever the conflict in the movie is. So right off the bat, I knew I had to find actors through the Thai community. So it was 2 years ago that we had written the short. We weren't even thinking about the VR at that point at all. I didn't even know what VR was. And so we went on Facebook, we met all the Thai people we knew, and it just, through the grapevine, found an actual Thai American girl who fit the body type and look, who actually took theater in high school. And so 2 years later, she had moved to New Zealand, and we were wondering, like, how are we going to find a Wonder Buffalo again after we went through all of that? And I called her up and just found out what her schedule was, which we already had the challenge of what would it be like to shoot a movie simultaneously with a VR piece, and to bring an actress in who was in the middle of college with a little break during the semester, fitting that all within 5 days of her availability. And then the Thai king died 10 days before we started shooting. And so all the adult actors that we had, more than half of them were actual actors at very not very experienced levels, and then some were their Thai friends that I was able to work with in small parts. Almost all of them decided that they wanted to go back to Thailand because the king had been king for 70 years. So we really had to jump through and reach out to the community, and all I did was call the actress's mother and said, please, can you be the lead mother in this movie? So the experience was very much believing in, if you want to represent and fight for diversity, there's got to be other skills that you have as a writer and director to work with non-actors, because just in general, not diverse actors don't get a lot of opportunities. So you're going to have to understand how to work with people with less experience anyway to get as best of a performance as you can. And in this one, it was specifically challenging because I think when we shot the holograms at 8i, I had no idea at first that it was one whole take. And then I also didn't have any idea that that one whole take was just one actor, that not both the actors were in there acting against each other. So it was a whole different way of prepping myself, but also prepping two actors who have never really acted before to go in there and do a full 2-minute, probably it was like doing a monologue, but having to look exactly where that golf ball was and understanding all this green screen and imagining it and able to do that performance. While listening to the others' characters' voices outside of this whole green screen dome. It was fascinating, and I really, really couldn't have done it without the support of the producers and the dedication of the two actresses and 8i. And also one of the photogrammetry person, Rainier Gambos, came with us because he really understood what we were doing and what we were putting that into. I know that's a long answer,
No,
but
that was great. That was great. Thank you.
it was a complex experience.
So in both the film and the VR experience, it's the same actresses? Okay, that's interesting. My kind of follow-up question to that was, if you think, and anyone on the panel can really answer this, if you think that VR, because of the immersive medium and when you really like see the character and kind of feel their presence, if that makes it more relevant to choose an actor that not only fits the look, but also the background, culture, and even like the lifestyle. Like you picked the Thai person versus just an Asian American actress. You specifically wanted someone who is Thai. And if you think the VR medium, because you're in the same room as them, that cultural background and that level of authenticity becomes more relevant.
So I'll kind of take a quick stab at that. You're finding as you get to 4K, UHD, and up, that more authenticity is really critical. You're starting to see the sets, you're starting to see the makeup, the other things that are layered over things. So finding that person that's authentic and is who they are is really getting more and more important and critical.
Yeah, it's as if the look is part of the performance, and it reads false if you don't have the look but you have a great performance. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's what the team and ultimately the director decides to risk. Some people, especially when there's a lot of money involved, don't want that risk. They think that the performance is what drives the success. But I think in the end, depending on what ultimately is happening, like we knew with this piece, it's not going into theaters, so we're not risking money for ticket sales. What is at risk with this piece? If we're going to go on a platform and talk about diversity and diverse stories, and also bringing that to a universal story that everyone can relate to. It would be so false to not do anything but the true background of the actors.
I do agree with Eric with the increased fidelity, although VR is very much in the standard definition days. But another interesting aspect that is enabled by VR and not traditional film is the idea of embodiment. And that was actually a really big point of discussion early on in the development of the VR piece, is whether or not we should embody the actress, especially because the main social message of the piece was around body dysmorphia. And ultimately, we debated this for weeks, and we went very far down the path of our initial inclination was to take a more literal approach to showing someone with body dysmorphia and putting the audience in that perspective, using mainly a mirror as a mechanic. And while the mirror remained in the final experience, I think ultimately we decided that putting a stake in the ground by showing exactly what you as the user look like within the experience was not the way that we wanted to go. And Christine really wanted to give it a more uplifting note and make the focus on imagination and this surreal comic book fantasy land as escape, which is also a great benefit of VR, is taking reality and making it totally surreal. So I think that was more in line with the message that Christine wanted to convey. But both are viable options, and perhaps there is more work to do in the VR space around body dysmorphia that could take a more embodied first-person POV approach to it.
Yeah, I think what Brian is great in bringing up is that we had so many options to tell this story in a VR space, and a lot of it had to do with choices I never knew were choices before, and specifically what technically can be done, what kind of vendors, what kind of technology, and what were the pros and cons of using it. When this was first brought to me, I remember that the project last year from this company also basically did a 360 VR, and my response was, why even do that? What's the difference between a flat screen piece and a 360 piece? As a storyteller who tells stories that bonks you over the head with message, how can we really give the user access to the experience? And Brian and Lindsay and Drew, and they were just so amazing to take someone who's never done VR before, who doesn't understand the language of this world, a storyteller, and help her and give her options and inspire her in other ways to not only for the message, but for the kind of actors that we had. And that's why there's two pieces to this. The beginning is as if you're standing on stage with two actors acting out a scene. And you really get to be present with number one, their accents. That was so important to me. I would laugh out loud or groan if I heard anything but Thai accents in this. You can feel the overweight daughter's uncomfortable sadness because you're there with her body, and you're not just seeing a 2D image of her body, you're physically walking around her and seeing that, and seeing her sitting on the floor, traditionally like Thai people do, with her mother towering over her with the insults. It was just amazing what the whole team brought together and what we did with all the different kinds of technology. The technology, I think, were also actors in this whole piece.
Interesting. Thank you so much. I wanted to delve into a little bit. So obviously the piece, you are feeling a lot of empathy for the teenage Thai girl in the piece. Something that I found surprising, and when I took it, I also felt empathy for the mother when you could hear her yelling these insults, but you could feel her own personal struggle, coming from a different cultural background and trying to do what she thought was best for her daughter. And since this is really reflective of your own personal upbringing, I was wondering if you kind of felt, the piece unlocked or changed your view of your mother, or how it's kind of affected your relationship with her.
Well, going into this relationship, it was going on 2 years that my mother and I don't speak anymore. So I have to honestly say that a lot of the importance of this of the movie and the VR pieces, my life has gone so far into damage that it's irreparable. As a filmmaker, as a storyteller, what am I trying to say that might help the viewer? Because there's no turning back from, I mean, there might be, but I don't see it happening. But it would, in the end, if I made a movie, again, that, you know, my mom sucks, what kind of movie is that? But I do remember that I had a life that had love in it. And I also have a background in visual anthropology and documentary. I've always been very careful in all my writing that the villain was also, had many dimensions, and also very careful that the best villains also have the best intentions. They really believe the fucked up shit they're doing. I feel really happy that you felt that. Not a lot of people are talking about the mother character, but Wonder Buffalo. But that was all, very on the surface, intentional, because it comes off very, Asian dragon mom, but the language that she's using is trying to show where her struggle is too.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I felt. I was like, obviously you feel so bad for the teenage daughter, but at the same time you're seeing this mother who is obviously so emotional about this. You can tell that there's this strong underlying passion. And so I felt like the duality was one of the most interesting parts of the piece, and kind of unique to the medium as well. I feel like if I would have seen it on a 2D screen, I would have fallen into the more traditional role of being like really angry towards the mother and not, yeah. I was wondering if any of the other panelists felt the same way, or what your guys' interpretation was of the mother.
We tried to build that into the game mechanic a little bit by limiting the user's interactivity in the first half. And if it was a traditional short film, you're used to being a passive observer. But putting a lot of people through this experience, we've seen people trying to interact with the mom, yelling at her, trying to stop her. And yeah, exactly, like building that sense of frustration over being a passive bystander and not being able to intervene. And then only when you escape into her imagination are you really allowed to exert control over the experience. We were trying to show that disparity and heighten the sense of frustration in the user as they witness this.
And I think one of the most heartbreaking things at the end of the actual scene is when that sad face comes up between them. Number one, it's like, oh, that's fucking cool, but at the same time, you're like, oh, this is so sad. That is the physical barrier between them. And drawing a sad face between two characters in a movie would never be like the experience you have in the VR, because you're standing there with that life-size sad face being drawn between them, and it becomes a more realistic experience, because we all know these things don't get solved in a movie.
Yeah, and one thing that I found really interesting now that we've had a chance to see people who experienced it at Sundance and now at South by is seeing them actually choose different ways about going through the experience. So many times they're instantly connected to Anne, the protagonist, who's there from the start. They sit at her eye level, and they almost unconsciously start mimicking the shots that a director would put if they wanted you to focus on her. Second time around, they know there's a character that's going to come through the door. They wait by the door. They explore from her point of view. They stand over her shoulder and do all these things that if a director were doing these as camera angles would be implying another point of view. And so what I've realized is that a lot of people are being able to go through this narrative scene and place themselves where they think the emphasis should be and look around and kind of take cues from it every time that they never had before, or before we would have been literally telling them, here's what's important. A close-up right here is what's important. A POV shot from Anne is what's important. And now it's absolutely at their discretion, which you find a lot of liberty in.
We're giving the user the ability to make their own shot list.
Definitely, yeah, that's definitely a major part of VR, is being able to craft the narrative as you see fit. And I think that's really interesting what you said about first going to the protagonist, and then the second time they will go and see it from the mother's point of view. Speaking of kind of reactions that you have seen, have you given the VR experience to Asian mothers, and what was their reactions to it?
I don't recall any Asian mothers yet.
Okay. So
My mom went in it. She screamed. Yeah. She was surprised.
It's sometimes like several actresses went through it, and they would sit down there with the girl to see how it felt, like totally trying into that position altogether, which is kind of neat.
Let's take this to Thailand, and I'll have my mom go in it.
that definitely very interesting to see how it affected your guys' dynamic. I'd also be interested to see, going forward with the piece, what you guys' plans are for expansion of it. If you have any, are you guys going to continually follow up and improve on it, or is this the final version?
Well, as far as the project goes, I think when we're done with it, that's it. I know there's probably some stuff Brian wants to talk about, the experience of every time we go through it, and we have a couple of last technical things to do, but that should be the end of it.
So the whole purpose of the short wasn't originally about the content. It was about doing R&D research for the studios. So giving them an experience of working with something that they weren't accustomed to or new, because you can't really do experimental research on live films that are greenlit that could cost you your career to screw up. So that is really kind of one of the ways that we were disconnected from what the content had to be, so we could choose freely a story that we loved and we had passion about. And the studios didn't care because it wasn't what their end goal was in this. So there was a unique opportunity in that.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Brian.
I was just going to say, specifically on the topic of social change in VR, I think a lot of people have talked about 360 journalism as the empathy machine, and I've seen some very, very powerful experiences in that realm. But I do think this could be seen, or what we were aiming for, I don't know if we achieved it, is an opening salvo into bringing physical assets into a more immersive environment, what's beyond 360 video. And I do feel, taking any perspective you want, weighting your experience towards either character, being in super immersive physical environments that you can walk around and feel a sense of agency, all of that deepens immersion even beyond a 360 video. So it just gives you that, elevated sense of being in the environment, understanding the world. And there's a long way to go, but I would love to see this approach applied to other important topics.
Thank you.
I even think beyond journalism, there's a lot of room in the mental health field, because there's so many videos you can watch, so many times you can go to a counselor, a psychiatrist, but there's a lot of role playing that goes on in those kind of experiences, that if you're role playing it, especially when, let's say, if it comes to PTSD or even familial problems, like I never even thought, have my mom go through this, to have people separate themselves from their own personal trauma, but go into something else that's not confrontational in a world that they can look outside themselves. I think there's a lot of room that this can, and more than just 360, because in this you really feel like you're there, and it does something else to your heart and your mind when you come out of it.